Well, you'll find also in your bulletins a little write-up, and you want to read along with me about who Brenda Strickland is, our guest speaker. She is a world traveler and author. Her new book, Life, Love, and Lilies, The Sanctified Self, is a rare balance of theological depth and practical application that will be an important part of anyone's spiritual journey. And I have read this book and I agree wholeheartedly. From the opening question of who am I and how did I get here, to the closing discovery of your own personal perfect fit into the world, you will find pearl after pearl of wisdom for your life. No matter what your dreams are or how remote or impossible they seem, everything you need to have them come true is already in you, and she's here to shine a light on that. Please welcome Brenda Strickland.
Thank you. I have been looking forward to being here ever since we decided I should come. So thank you for welcoming me. What she just said about everything you need to have your dreams come true is already in you is something that we believe on one foot, but then we stand on the other foot and we doubt it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I used to have a dream. My dream was to find and draw out the inner music in every child I met. And I got to do that for 35 years as an elementary music teacher. What I discovered is that that dream was fueled by a desire. And that desire, which was God knocking at my door, that's what Charles Fillmore used to say, was to know and experience God more completely, more deeply. I love music. I love children. What better way to know and experience God than to share my love of music with my love of children? And I got to do that for 35 years. Time to move on. New dreams, new desires. But the interesting things that I discovered, and that's the third element in this talk this morning, is that when you have that deep desire, when that desire emerges clothed in a dream, you will discover everything you need to make it happen. Now, discovering doesn't mean you have to go get it. It means it's already there. So I'm going to ask you to think about Easter egg hunts. Did you do that here for your kids in Sunday school? Yeah, we always do one at Atlanta Unity. In an Easter egg hunt, the child will have a basket and absolutely confident that there are many, many eggs to be found. That child will go in search, looking for eggs. And if the first place that she looks doesn't have an egg, that does not discourage her. She knows there are many more. As soon as she finds one, it goes in the basket, and she goes searching for the rest of the eggs. When somehow that child is convinced that there are no more eggs to be found, usually because an adult has persuaded her that they're all gone, she'll go sit down and she'll open up those plastic eggs one by one. And again, she is confident that in each of those eggs, there is a wonderful treat. Maybe it's a little plastic ring, maybe it's a Tootsie Roll, but she's convinced and confident that she will discover what she needs. So discovery is an important idea. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in and then just let it out. And when you let that breath out, don't breathe in again. And when you absolutely have to, relax and breathe in again. That feeling, did you notice that little feeling? It's almost like panic begins to rise. Wait a minute, I'm going to need to breathe. She said not to, but I'm going to need to breathe. And all of a sudden, you got to breathe again. We're going to do that again. I would like you to notice that feeling when you begin to realize how deeply you desire that breath. So take a deep breath again, and then let it out. And when you're completely empty, just hold that emptiness. And when you can't hold it any longer, go ahead and breathe. That sense of panic, that it's not really panic, but that sense of urgency when you need to take that breath is life's longing for itself. Your body knows it needs oxygen, it needs to breathe. If you somehow are prevented from receiving breath, the life in your body is threatened. Now, we didn't go that far. I wasn't trying to hurt you, but I did want you to understand what the feeling of desire feels like. Life longing for itself. That's a quote from Khalil Gibran in The Prophet. It's actually in the chapter on children, that your children are the product of life's longing for itself. It's not just your children. It's everything you've ever done to create. What you create, what emerges as you follow your desire is the result of life longing for itself. So in that first chapter of Life, Love, and Lilies, Life, Love, and Lilies has evolved. I'm interrupting myself, but the current title is Everyday Spirituality, because some people found that the Sanctified Self was really a title. So the ones you have in your bookstore, I believe, are the Sanctified Self. The one that's been recently printed is Everyday Spirituality. Same book, same message, same idea. Everyday spirituality is living as your sanctified self. As Sydney mentioned, the beginning is about who am I and how did I get here? And in that chapter, I say there's only one supreme creative power in the universe. Every living being is a manifestation or expression of that power. That power is infinitely creative, expressing itself in every thought, word, or action. We experience that creative power as desire, that longing for breath, that energy that prompts us to breathe, or to speak, or to act. When we notice our desire, we notice this impetus, something in us is wanting to emerge, we begin to create a dream around that. And we clothe that dream in ideas, in imagery that emerge from our world as we experience it. Because we live in a body that was created from the DNA from two parents, that DNA created a blueprint. And so, that's why we look different. We have different DNA. That DNA also determined some of the structures in our brains that gave us a real talent for throwing a fastball, or a real talent for singing beautifully or playing a musical instrument. That DNA blueprint gave us affinities and abilities. But as our bodies grew from infancy through toddlerhood and childhood into adulthood, we ran through a whole sequence, a curriculum actually. A curriculum is really a running course. A curriculum of life experiences. And those life experiences interacted with our bodies and our brains, and they generated our attitudes and our knowledge and our skills. So we've got a whole array of genetic abilities, knowledge, and skills to bring to bear on this dream. And we use those things to color and fill out our dream. The most important piece of that dream is that our consciousness is lit by the Spirit of God. That spark in you that makes you alive, that we see in your eyes when we talk to you, that we see and hear in your voice when you sing to us. That's God. That's God expressing His light and love through us. And that's where our dream takes on its embodiment. So here our desire has emerged from within. Our dream has been filled out in imagery from our experiences. And we move towards this desire. When we're engaged in pursuing this desire, like hunting for Easter eggs, or reading a really good book, or in a deep, profound conversation with someone, have you ever noticed that time sort of disappears? And something else that you had thought you would get done sort of doesn't matter anymore. And the only thing that matters is continuing your involvement with whatever this is. Composers and musicians experience this, gardeners experience this, artists experience this, writers. People who do things that call them deeper into challenge, into the sweet spot of challenge where you are using everything you've got. You're succeeding, but you know there's more, and it draws you forward. Sometimes that's referred to as being in the flow or being in the zone, right? When you're there, you are totally attuned to the divine. You are totally hooked up. Being in the flow, being in the zone, is being God in you, as you, and through you. So I want to do you another quote here from Life, Love, and Lilies. Being who we came to be. Being the spirit, clothed in the body, created from the blueprint and the DNA of our biological parents, sculpted and formed by our life experiences. When we are in that zone, it says in order to experience that zone, we need to be working in that challenge sweet spot. It's a degree of difficulty that's just challenging enough to keep us tantalized, engaged, and almost not quite satisfied. Being on that green, growing edge, intent on applying everything that we know and everything that we are. We're applying everything we have to having our dream come true. We're in that process of discovery, seeking answers to our questions, seeking solutions to our problems, seeking ways to go forward. So we're using all those gifts from being created in God's image and likeness. So, okay, God's image and likeness. We all look real different. Which God do we look like? If we're created in God's image and likeness. Now, I am guessing that you here at One World have been spiritual students long enough to know that it's not the physical image and likeness of God we're created in. The image of, I'm lost. Okay. It's the spiritual image. But a really powerful illustration of this is the difference between a photograph and a hologram. Have you ever thought about the difference between a photograph and a hologram? Photograph is made by passing light through a film negative. The light passes through the negative onto sensitive paper that then turns color and produces the photograph. A hologram is a whole different deal. You probably have a hologram on a credit card or a debit card. I know I've got a really cool eagle on mine. A hologram is not produced from a negative. It's produced from a holographic plate. And if you look at a holographic plate, all you see is kind of an interesting texture of squiggles and dots. It bears no resemblance to the actual hologram. In order to create a hologram, this laser beam has to be bounced off that holographic plate. It has to bounce off and be bounced back onto another surface, at which point we see this three-dimensional image of whatever was used to create the image, the plate. This is really important because we are not photographic images of God. We are holographic images of God. And the difference is that if you have a fragment of a photographic negative, you're only going to get a fragment of that photograph, aren't you? But if you have a fragment of a holographic plate and you bounce a laser beam from it, you're going to get the whole image. I don't know how it does that, but it does. So, each of us is the holographic image of God. And what that means is that in that fragment of that holographic plate, all of God's creativity, all of God's love, all of God's wisdom, strength, power, you name it, is in us. Because we are holographic images of God. That's really, when that occurred to me, I just had a lot of fun playing with that idea. So, there was one person The Old Testament, I'm going to quote the Old Testament today. There's one guy in the Old Testament who had a wonderful series of laser experiences to reveal the hologram that was within him as the image of God. When he was a young boy, he had wonderful experiences with wonderful prophetic dreams in which his wheat sheaf stood in the middle of the field and all the other sheaves bowed down. His star stood tall in the heavens, and the sun and the moon and all the other stars bowed to it. And you probably know that this is Joseph towards the end of Genesis. So, you know the story. Joseph's brothers were tired of him. They sold him to the traders. The traders sold him into slavery. He got enslaved in Egypt. He was promoted to a pretty responsible position in the household, but then the owner's wife misbehaved and he got blamed. So then he got thrown into prison. Oops, that's not so good. In prison, he began interpreting the dreams of others, and they brought him out. He had wonderful things happen and terrible things happen. Eventually, the Pharaoh discovered his amazing gift. Now, the deal is, Joseph, while he was in prison, when things were going well, when things were going badly, no matter what, Joseph stayed tuned into the holographic plate of God that was his true nature. He did not allow the laser beam, allow his fragmentation by bad circumstances to pull him away from that identity. He stayed with it. He maintained that close relationship with God. And through that close relationship with God, he knew that it was going to be okay. So finally, the 7 years of plenty in Egypt came and went, and the storehouses were full. And then the 7 years of famine came to the surrounding countryside, and everybody was starving to death, except the Egyptians. They were fine. And so the people from the surrounding countryside came in to buy food. Among them came, guess what? His brothers. And they did not know him because they figured he had died a long time since. Well, imagine their shock and awe when they realized that this powerful Egyptian leader, to whom they were begging for relief for their families, was really their little brother Joseph. Imagine their horror when they remembered what they had done to him. And Joseph spoke to them and he said, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God meant it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, not only the Egyptians, but the people from the neighboring countries. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this way, he reassured them. This is how the laser beam of difficulty allowed the full hologram of God to emerge through Joseph. There's another one. Another story of Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle had some issues. She was born a sickly child in a sickly family. You probably know this whole story. Somebody said, "You're a child of God. You do not inherit sickness." Myrtle took that to heart. She spent time every day in the silence imagining Jesus, because she had been raised in a Christian home. Imagining Jesus sitting beside her. You could imagine Buddha. You could imagine Shiva. You could imagine any power that you wish with you, supporting you, holding your hand as you grow into the fullness of having your dream come true. So in Life, Love, and Lilies, I talk about living every day as a spiritual being. Going back to Joseph, Joseph rethought his circumstances. He framed them in the light of God's infinite love for each of his children. It allowed him to release and rise above the hurt and anger of having been treated unfairly. He was free to follow the path of divine guidance, growing through those years of limitation and hardship to abundant prosperity and honor. God was revealed through Myrtle as her intense desire for wholeness and robust health. She had 3 sons, 3 young sons, and a husband. She wanted to be there for them. It was an intense desire. Her dream was to be whole, and she discovered her wholeness in that timeless silence. So, considering your desires and your dreams in your life, what discoveries have you been noticing? You've been noticing some things that are supporting you. We heard of some today in these prayer requests. Well, you may remember in the Old Testament again, the story of Joshua. Joshua was Moses' brother, and they left Egypt. So we're doing a lot of this Egypt thing today. Joshua led the Hebrews out of Egypt into the desert, and they wandered around for 40 years, long enough for a generation to come and go. Finally, they were up on Mount Horeb, looking down on the promised land, and Moses passed. God drew him into the invisible, and Joshua became the leader. During all these 40 years, the Hebrews had become really distracted. Some of them were pretty cranky because they were ready to settle down. And if they weren't going to settle down, they thought maybe they'd like to just go on back to Egypt, where they knew what was what. Others were enticed by the people around them, the Amorites. And Joshua got pretty fed up with all this, and he said to them, and you probably remember this, choose this day whom you will serve. Are you going to serve the gods of the land beyond the river where our ancestors were? Are you going to serve the gods of the Amorites in whose land we're living? As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And those people had to make a choice. The ones who chose to follow the Lord went down to Jericho, and you know the story. Which God are you serving? Which God are you following? So there's another quote from Life, Love, and Lilies that I want to share with you. It says, when you feel scared or worried or envious or irritated, are you serving the Lord of the visible world? Are you serving what you've heard others say? Are you buying into the notion that you're a limited being with finite resources of life, love, and substance? If I'm serving the Lord of my being, the God that emerges through me as my desires and my dreams, that shows me, helps me recognize the discoveries that are meant for me, I am attuned to the creative life force which emerges as my desires. If I'm serving the Lord, my dreams are visions of the highest and best expressions of my talents, skills, knowledge, and experience. If I'm serving the Lord, I look for and notice my discoveries of inspiration and creativity and love and courage and compassion. One of the key statements in Life, Love, and Lilies is sanctified by God in me, as me, and through me. I am integral and indispensable to my world. My desires, dreams, and discoveries are the result of God expressing in me, as me, and through me. They are the creation of God, of life's longing for itself, the creation of God knocking at the door. So with that thought in mind, let's get ready for meditation.